Hey guys, Danny Flexen here with this week's edition of FLEXpectations, a weekly look at the biggest fights coming up at the weekend. A lot of boxing action this weekend, a lot of televised action in the UK especially, but to quote a little known TV show, there's only one war that matters and it's here. And if I've misquoted that, loads of nerds are going to be caning me now, but it takes one to know one, I guess, so I'll take it in my stride. But the big fight is obviously Mikey Garcia, Errol Spence Jr. for the IBF welterweight title in Texas, home state of Errol Spence, and I don't expect home advantage, if it is an advantage, to play that big a role. It's an absolutely mouth-watering fight, there's no question about it. So people who are calling it a mismatch, I think you're wrong. I think it's going to be a competitive fight. I think Mikey Garcia is a 4-weight world champion going into this. Errol Spence only won his world title 3 fights ago, I think, against Kell Brook. Both incredibly impressive fighters, but I don't see a mismatch at all. I see size and strength obviously being in the favour of Spence, but I see a lot of advantages for Garcia too. So we'll talk about that a bit before we get into who's going to win and possible betting odds to give you value for the fight, because it is a tight fight, but there are value opportunities available, I think. Let's start with Errol Spence. Olympian, very athletically gifted, strong, fast, agile, and a real power puncher too. You know, he might not knock you out with one shot, but he gradually breaks you down. Every shot hurts. He goes to the body well as the head. We saw in his fight with Kell Brook, he's very composed as well. You know, he's fighting away from home. His first world title shot, Brook was winning early on, caused him some problems with his timing and his speed. But Spence gradually worked Brook out and then gradually broke him down. And we know the damage that Brook took in that fight for the second fight in a row, unfortunately, for Kell. But getting back to Spence, with a home crowd, a partisan home crowd against him, he wasn't flustered. He stuck to his game plan. He knew what he wanted to do, and he got Brook out of there and took his world title. Since then, he's kind of meandered a little bit. Fought Lamont Peterson, decent enough challenger. Carlos Ocampo, not so much. Looking for big fights. You know, he's a PBC fighter. He's got other guys in his stable. Sean Porter, for example, another world champion. But he's wanted a big fight for a while. He's needed one for a while. He's only 29. I mean, he's not kind of on the cusp of losing what he's got yet. He's very fresh as well for that age. But it is time for him to step up. It is time to see what he's got. And a lot of people out there, critics, are saying, well, this isn't a step up. You know, he's fighting a guy whose last fight was 135 pounds, 12 pounds less than the welterweight limit. You know, a guy that started his career at featherweight, much naturally smaller guy. We saw in the head-to-heads that Mikey Garcia obviously is officially 3 inches shorter than Spence, but it might be even more than that. And people say, well, is this a real step-up fight for Spence? Which leaves Spence, as he's admitted himself, in a bit of a no-win situation, in that if he gets Garcia out there in spectacular fashion, people say, well, he was too small anyway. If he struggles, they'll say he was struggling with a guy who's a lot smaller than him, who he should have got out there earlier. And I just think it's all a bit unfair. Because if we move on to Mikey Garcia, we're talking about an excellent fighter. He's 31, he's had 39 fights, 15 more I think than Spence, so he's a lot more experienced, but he's still relatively fresh. He had 2 years out of the ring, not by his own choosing, between 2014, 2016, promotional problems with his previous handler's Top Rank. That's all sorted now, and I think that served to freshen him up a little bit. He came back and looked as good as ever. I think his first fight back, or maybe his second fight back, I'll have to check, beat Dejan Zlaticanin. You try saying that with a mouthful of jelly beans. But he beat him, stopped him with a great knockout one we've seen countless times on highlight reels since, to win the WBC lightweight title. And he's just looked good ever since. He's picked up belts at both lightweight and super lightweight, taken the scalp of Adrian Broner as well at super lightweight. Obviously not competed previously above 140 pounds, which is a concern for many. And again, as we've said before, his other belts were picked up at, you know, feather, super feather, lightweight, super lightweight. All weights below the one at which Spence reigns at the moment. So I understand the concerns. To assuage some of them, Mikey realised in advance of this he needed to change up his training a little bit. So he went over to the SNAC facility run by Victor Conte. Previously a controversial figure, but not so much now. Went over there to work on a different type of training he'd done in the past, realising that this is the biggest challenge of his life for many reasons, and he needed to change things up a little bit. You can read about the training he did there on ESPN. Steve Kim's done an excellent article on it, really insightful. I urge you all to go and read that. But basically what surprised me most about Garcia's training is that the focus wasn't on gaining muscle and gaining weight and be able to compete with Spence on a strength versus strength basis, because that would be a fool's errand. What he's done really is work on his explosivity and his speed, working with track coach Remy Korshemny among others, to really make sure his speed's on point. Because against a bigger man like Spence and someone who's got quite fast hands as well, I think it's really important for Garcia to be able to get in and out quickly, you know, get in, throw his punches, make them count and get out without causing himself too much danger. A little bit like Amir Khan tried to do against Canelo, but with greater success. And we should say as well that there aren't question marks about Mikey's chin, at least not at 135 and 140, although Spence does hit very hard. Let's not underrate Mikey's power though. He hits very hard too. Again, we haven't seen them against the bigger guys, although I believe he spars them in the gym regularly and they feel that power. He's very experienced, he's very poised. He's quite a fundamental boxer, you know, he's not out of the ordinary, but everything he does very well. He's got a great jab, his counter punching's really good, his ring generalship's excellent, he always knows where he is in the ring and where he needs to be. Combination punching, he doesn't throw kind of 5s and 6s very often, or certainly not anymore, but the punches he throws are generally very accurate and he makes them count. His footwork's excellent too. Spence is the more decorated amateur, but Garcia appears to have the better fundamental skills. He believes that apart from potentially power, as well as strength and size of course, he has the edge in every other department. That remains to be seen. I think Spence's hand speed should be at least on a par with Garcia's, even given the weight differential. But apart from that, he's probably got a point. You know, he is the better boxer. So it all adds up to a very, very interesting fight. You know, Garcia's the more experienced guy. He's fought a better opposition, no doubt about that. Probably almost as fresh as well because of the break he's had. Spence arguably is still a guy on the way up, still an improving fighter, desperate to make his name, make his mark. Very big puncher, hurtful, strong in the clinches, so Mikey will be wanting to avoid clinches at all costs, I would think, because he's very strong in the clinches, very good inside. Spence, good body puncher. Both got good teams around them. It's just shaping up to be an excellent main event on the show in Texas. To get value out of this fight, which is something I alluded to earlier, it's not the easiest thing in the world. I don't think you'll get great odds on Spence winning either by stoppage or by decision. But if you're convinced that Mikey's extra class will prove the difference in this fight, I think it's very, very unlikely that he stops Spence, and I'm willing to have egg on my face on Monday as a result, but I think it's very unlikely he stops him. I think if he wins, it's on points. If you're convinced Mikey's the better man and he can get this done, I think he's 5-1 best odds to win by a decision. So well worth putting a cheeky tenner on that, or even more. For American viewers, a tenner is £10, if you hadn't worked it out. I quite like the odds of evens for the fight to go the distance. I think Mikey's very tough, but also I think he's very cunning. I think if he realises that he's getting hurt by Spence, I think he's smart enough, clever enough to keep his wits about him and get out of trouble and last the distance. So I think even if the fight doesn't go his way, I don't see him getting stopped. And I certainly don't see Spence getting stopped. So fight to go the distance is evens at the moment. I think that's a pretty good bet. But yeah, what we'd like to hear from you in comments below, as we always do. As much as I love comments about the backdrop, which we are continually working on, but that aside, what I'd really like to hear comments on is the fight itself. What type of fight do you expect? Who do you think's got the edge going in, Garcia or Spence? Who do you think is going to win and why? And how? You know, what round are they going to win in, or is it going to be by decision? Be as specific as you want, but we want to know your views on the fight. It'd be really good to hear from you. We'll be back to reflect on the fight and all the other action from the weekend on Monday in Reflections. But next Thursday we'll be back again 4:30 PM for FLEXpectations. Really appreciate you listening, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers.